Girls, you guys are in for a treat. There is someone in this room that has known me longer than my husband, Pastor Brendan. She has been there from the beginning. As she said, she remembers that college freshman girl walking into Tulsa, Oklahoma, from Long Island and just scared out of her everlasting mind. That was me. That was my confident friend over there. And they have some pictures. Do we have some pictures? She actually pulled up some pictures from college. Well, this is her family. Wait, skip that. That's a good picture. Skip that. This is me in her wedding. We were in each other's weddings. That was college. That was in the hallway. This was face mask days, college days. Well, and then we'll get to that in a minute. That's how our families have gotten together for the last couple of summers. We are the best of friends. And I am so excited for her to share a story. So my dear friend Megan, will you please come join me on this? All right, so we're going to let you spill whatever you want to spill in the beginning about the good old days. Oh, a mic. A microphone, be good. There we go. There you go. So we met in 1999. Oral Roberts University, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yes.
You have any memories that you want to share? I won't hold you to
anyone. You said it all. She was homeschooled. So she came in.
You guys know that?
Yes. And I do. I remember meeting you. We were on the same floor.
So in other words, I was socially awkward.
And I was from Iowa. I live in North Carolina now, but I was this girl from Iowa. And we just connected. I'm like, she's from New York. That's so foreign. Where's New York?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then from there, we would stay up all night and order Papa John's pizzas.
We would, and I'll speak for myself, put on the freshman 30. Yes, we ate way too much pizza. Okay, it was fun.
So let me just tell you something. Hopefully you won't hate her forever. But she introduced me to tanning beds.
Yes, I don't do it anymore.
I have never done it since college. That was the end of it. But she introduced me to that, and so we would go into the cafeteria fried in January.
Well, I convinced her vitamin D was good, and that's how we were going to get it. So,
right. And I was gullible, and I went for it. So, yeah, so that's funny. That. So tell us, let's go ahead and put her picture of her family up. So why don't you introduce your family to us a little bit?
Let's see. Okay, there we are. So first of all, my family is obsessed with Disney. We love Disney World.
Disney fans?
So we go quite frequently. We were just there last week celebrating my youngest, Maribel. She turned 8, and then Madeline is 10, and then my husband, Matt, is right there, and then me.
So
that's my family.
We didn't plan this, but we were pregnant at exactly the same time.
We were.
She was 10 weeks farther ahead of both babies. So she would call me and tell me she was pregnant, and then I would call her 4 weeks later and tell her I was pregnant.
I know.
And I said, let's just stop, because we were only going to have 2 kids. And I said, why don't you, because every time you get pregnant, I get pregnant. So why don't you stop?
And what's funny is I came to visit her a couple years ago, and I got off the airplane, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and I'm like, you're pregnant. And that was with Grace.
It was 3 weeks.
And I'm like, I don't want to be pregnant. I can't be pregnant. This wasn't in the plan.
I said, just drink bottled water. You'll be fine.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's our story.
Yes.
So why don't you just share with me a little bit? You said you grew up in Iowa. So
yes. So
a little bit about your family.
So I knew the Lord from a very young age. I grew up in a Christian home, a non-denominational church, just like this. So I was around it all the time. It was one of those churches where you went to the morning service and it lasted 3 hours, and then you went home, took a nap, and then you came back, and then you went to the Sunday night service, and that lasted till 10 o'clock at night. So, and then there was Wednesday service, and then there was stuff in between. So we were at church all the time. My parents served in the ministry, and did different things there. So I grew up in the church. I remember getting baptized at a young age. And from that moment, I just flourished in my relationship with the Lord. I went on missions trips, and I was in small groups, and I did different things in the church, and I just really had a compassion for people. And where I lived, there was just one church that was like this. And so I found that it was very challenging, especially in high school. I went to a public high school, and it was really hard because I was one of the few Christian people there. And so everyone knew it, and I was never pressured to do anything. I was considered a very good girl. I followed all the rules, the no drinking, smoking, all of the rules that you hear growing up. And I really stuck to it, and we'll kind of get into this as we go, but that really began to shape who I was. And I had a great role model in my parents. They've been married for 40 years. So that's a praise report in itself. And they have a beautiful marriage, and I looked up to them, and I really was truly blessed from the day that I was born, all the way through. And I ended up at ORU because I was craving more. I wanted something different. And I had always been the person, ministering to people and praying for people, and I loved that, but I wanted my tank full too. And so I found out about ORU, and there I went. I left Iowa.
So our freshman year, she was single, so we were friends.
Yes.
And then what happened?
So what happened was, this is a fun story. So my husband will tell you, and Danielle knew my husband. I think you even knew him probably before
Megan.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he tells a story that I walked by him and I asked for humanities answers to a test, and I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. I would not cheat. I was valedictorian. That's what I tell him. I would not cheat. But anyways, the story really is he was playing basketball in the gym, and he winked at me. And he had me at the wink. And so I stopped, and I hung around. I'm like, this guy just winked at me. And the rest is history. We dated for 2 years, and I hurried up my college. I graduated in 3.5 years because he was a year ahead of me. And we got married. I graduated in December, and we got married a week later in January. I was in a hurry.
And it was amazing. The wedding was beautiful.
Yes, and I just have to say, what attracted me to my husband, well, besides he's hot, I think he's so handsome. He was so chivalrous. Yeah. He was a Southern gentleman from North Carolina. His parents instilled great values in him, and he loved the Lord. And I was so blown away that I met somebody that was so just connected with the Word. He grew up in a Christian home as well. We have a very similar story. And so he was a Bible scholar. I could ask him anything, and he could tell me. So I was attracted to that. I love that about him.
Yeah. And that's so true. Matt was always sociable to all the girls.
Yes,
I love that.
He was.
So you got married. So describe your early years of marriage. Tell everyone what happens in those first years.
Yeah. So my husband decided that he was going to go to med school. And I knew this all along. He was a biomedical chemistry major, and I was a communications major. So he decided to go to medical school. So we got married, and I moved to North Carolina. And for 6 months, we had a really happy, wonderful, simple life. He was teaching before going to medical school, and I got a job there, and it was really fun. We just got to know each other, and we were young. I was 22, he was 23, so we had a lot of fun, and like I said, we got to know each other. And then it was time to go to medical school, so we moved to Iowa, and he did 4 years of schooling there. And so I quit my job, and we moved. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with how much work it takes to go through medical school and residency, but it was a lot. And I tell people we went to medical school, and they look at me and they're like, "You're a doctor?" No. But I was with my husband while he was doing it. It was a lot of work. So he was very, very busy studying and doing his thing, and I submerged myself in work. So I started working. I had a very demanding job, and I really began to find my identity in my work. So the suits and the high heels really began to define who I was. And so I started feeling this power, like, oh, I'm a woman, I've got this, my husband's in school, I'm paying the bills. And so I just kind of went on this little path of, I'm good. And I really started to lose focus of what a marriage looks like. And we were going to church, we were in a small group, we were connected, but I started to sense like a shift in my heart. I didn't know what it was. I didn't talk about it with anybody, but I felt just like, there's something here. I'm not sure what it is. And so over time, am I skipping ahead? No. Okay. So over time, our relationship just kind of became stagnant. I love my husband. He loved me. We knew what the word said, but the sparks weren't there anymore. And we never talked about it. And we never went to anybody to talk about it. And we would go out, and people called us Barbie and Ken all through college. So that perfection was kind of rooted in my heart. And so we would go out, and everything looked perfect. It was Matt and Megan. And so I put on a happy face, and I'm like, I love my husband. This is how marriage is, I guess. We were surrounded with people that were experiencing similar situations. The husbands were in school, the wives were working. Everything seemed fine. So it was time to move again. So we moved a third time. I quit my job for a second time. I was pregnant, and we moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for residency. So I'm like, surely it's going to get better because he's kind of has a real job now, sort of. So he's not studying as much. So we went to Pennsylvania, and I found myself again in this new city with no family, no church home, having to start all over. And this time I had a newborn. So it was a lot more challenging. And we talked a little bit about this, but that ugly seed that had been planted of perfection and pride and even resentment kind of started to surface a little bit because I got tired of quitting my job, leaving my friends, and moving for this man that I married. And I had always envisioned my life to be a white picket fence. It's a white picket fence with kids and everything is great. And it wasn't looking like that. And so, Matt was so sweet. He would come home from work and, take care of the baby and offer to make dinner and send me on spa days. We didn't have a lot of money then. He would do special things for me. He loved me so much. And I would just push him away. And I got to the point where I started telling him, I don't need you. You know what? I'll take care of it myself. That was my line. I'll take care of it myself. And he started feeling rejected. And I could see it, but I really didn't know how to fix it. It was just something that was kind of bubbling over inside of me. All the while, I'm going to church. I'm involved in MOPS. We're doing small groups, and I'm sitting here with this heavy burden on my chest. This can't be marriage. This can't be my life. And I remember the day my husband came home, and it was late, and I had thought he was going to be home for dinner, and I prepared this nice dinner, and he didn't show up because he got stuck in surgery. And he normally called, but he couldn't call because he was busy working. And so I went ahead and threw the dinner away. When he got home, I said, I'm never going to cook dinner for you again. And he looked at me just shocked, and he said, I love you so much. I understand. I'm doing this for us. It'll be over soon, just a few more years, and it'll get better. And then I began to kind of ignore him. You know, he'd come home and I would just do my thing. I'd keep saying, I've got this. You don't need to do it. And he'd say, I love you. How can I serve you? Can I pray with you? Like, he was just pushing in as I was starting to pull back because I had resentment in my heart. And I didn't realize it at the time. I had no idea that's what it was because I put on a happy face everywhere that I went. And that's just what I did. So I also, something else that I would do, he would come home, you know, and try to hold my hand or give me a kiss, and I would turn away or I'd walk away and I'd withhold from him, and he would just continue to push in and pray. And that's what I love about my husband. Like, he really does not give up. So for 10 years, he did not give up. And we found ourselves pregnant again at the end of residency. So this is fast forward 10 years into our marriage. And he went to Italy for a fellowship, and I was pregnant. We were getting ready to move to North Carolina. And he sent me this beautiful letter. I should have jumped on a plane and flown across the country. And it had a family mission statement, and it had his vision for our family and prayers and just how much he loved me and wanted to serve me. And I remember reading that letter, and I read it with a stoic face, and it really didn't touch me. Like, I remember reading over and over again, and I was just reading words, and I'm like, what is wrong? Like, my heart was so hardened from years of resentment that started 10 years prior. And it had escalated to this point. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. Is this a problem? Does everyone in marriage experience this? And we had our daughter Maribel and packed up 10 days later and moved from Pennsylvania to North Carolina. So I quit my job. So at the time, I was teaching aerobics there. So I found myself at the gym a lot. So I quit that job. So now I've quit, how many jobs is that? Like 3 or 4. And I moved again for like the 4th time. And I'm in a new city, no friends, no church, no family, 2 babies, and my husband is working. And so it was lonely. It was really, really, really lonely. And my husband continued to push in. We got plugged in to church and to small groups, but I was still missing something. That hardness in my heart had not left. And I didn't know how to get rid of it at all.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's so important, is that it's the seeds. It's the seeds that the Bible talks about it being a foothold that the enemy takes in our life. And he's so sly, we don't even see it. I know my husband says a lot of times from stage that no one wakes up in the morning and says, today's a good day to be an alcoholic. No one wakes up in the morning and says, today's a good day to be a drug addict. No one wakes up in the morning and says, today's a really good day to become addicted to gambling and to lose my family's entire livelihood. It never happens that way. It always happens small doses of poison. The enemy just drops these little things in our hearts. Thoughts. Abby called one out on the stage today. Isolation. We start thinking we're isolated, and we're not, but he all of a sudden starts pointing. The enemy is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about he. He starts pointing. See, she didn't look at you. She didn't say hi to you. You know, your best friend did not even call you on your birthday. And all of a sudden, like Megan was saying, we start harboring these resentments, and we think no one else is going through this. I'm the only one. No one else. Who do I call to tell this to? That would sound terrible. I'm Barbie. I'm perfect. I teach aerobics. And if I call anyone and say, this is not the life I signed up for, people are going to say, are you out of your minds? I believe that the Holy Spirit right now is pointing out words, thoughts, lies. Don't ignore those. They're poison. There's a plan and there's a purpose. The enemy says that the Bible says that the enemy's come to kill, steal, and destroy. And that is the plan that he has for our life. But God has such a greater plan. So I remember actually the very day. It was the wildest story. I was driving to the Philadelphia airport, and I was dropping off. The Lord blessed me with 3 incredible girlfriends at ORU. And I think the Lord blessed me with these 3 girls because my story is similar to Megan's, is that I moved a lot of places, and getting up and leaving and starting relationships over. God really blessed me with 3 godly friends there. And so one of my friends had come here because I just moved here, and she thought, well, I'm just going to come. I want to see where you're at now. And so I was dropping her off at the airport. And I hugged her neck. It was Sarah Grace. I don't even know if you remember this. And all of a sudden, we were saying bye, and my phone rang, and it was Megan. And I go, Sarah Grace, I gotta go. This is Megan. We all knew each other. And she goes, oh, tell her I said hi. Tell her I said hi. And I said, okay. And so I drop her off, and it's Megan. And she, can hardly talk. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to the cell phone parking lot. And that's when you started telling me something's not right. Yeah. You remember that?
I do. So, yeah, I called her, and I finally set aside a little bit of pride, and I decided to call Danielle because I knew that she would not judge me. I knew that she would stand with me and call me out if I needed to be called out, and pray with me and encourage me towards hope. And I called her, and I told her literally the most earth-shattering, not just pieces. When I say earth-shattering, it's not pieces. It's like ashes and dust, gut-wrenching, most painful, excruciating thing that I have ever uttered out of my mouth. And my husband... Well, let me just back up real quick before I tell you. I had a very close friend where we lived, and I kept everything very private. I was really hard to get to know for fear of people thinking, something of me. I had to uphold this perfection, right? Because that's who I was. And so I had this friend, and she could tell something wasn't right. And so she kept pressing in, what's wrong? She'd call me, is something wrong? And I'm like, no, everything's great. Everything is good. And so she started calling my husband. And is Megan okay? Is everything okay in your marriage? And before you knew it, my husband was being filled emotionally by my friend. And one thing led to another, and that's the day that I called Danielle, and I said, Danielle, I don't know what I've done, but this isn't good. And I said, my husband has betrayed me with my friend. And it was awful. It was an awful feeling. I felt rejected. I felt alone. I felt betrayed. I felt shame. I felt guilt. I felt like it was my fault because I had been a terrible, horrible, no good. I don't know if you guys know that book. Yeah. Very bad wife. Yep. And I didn't know how to fix this. I'm a fixer, and I can fix everything, but this I could not undo. And I remember calling her and saying, what do I do? Please pray. I have to keep this private. I can't let people know about this. I need to know what to do. I was desperate. I was so desperate that I called prayer ministries. I submitted emails. I went online, and I would ask for prayer because I didn't know where else to go. Now, I have, like Danielle said, I've got a couple really good friends from college that I can call on. In my community, I didn't have those people yet because we were still new to the area. And so I was reaching out to people I didn't know to pray for me and my husband and my marriage. And out of acts of desperation, the Lord broke me. That's what happened. At the end of the day, when I look back, I was completely broken. And he knocked me down. And the best thing out of all of it is that when you're broken, there's only one way out, and it's up. And so I remember falling to my knees and, asking those questions, why me, Lord? Why us? How did this happen? I don't know what to do. And I remember calling out to the Lord, and he spoke to me, Exodus 14:14, be still, I will fight for you. And I also heard, be strong and courageous. And so I found this little trickle of hope, like, okay, I think I've got this. Like, I can do this. I began to put sticky notes all over my house with Bible verses. I prayed. I would stay up all night long, literally with the lights on, and I would pray. And at this point, my husband, as far as he was concerned, our marriage was done. He loved me, and he told me that, but he didn't want the life that we had formed. Mm-hmm. He wanted to be loved by someone. And he knew what had happened was wrong, but we just didn't know how to fix it. We thought there was no turning back. And so I would stay up and pray and fast and do everything biblical that I could think of, literally. And I even remember telling Danielle, like, I went outside. My neighbors must have thought I was crazy, but I went outside and marched around my house 7 times because I was bringing the walls down. I did. So I did that, and I was walking in faith, and I kept it very, very private. There were just a couple people, my parents and some friends who were praying for me, but I soon found out that I was holding on so tight to this marriage, and I still had this pride within me, and I had to let go. And I remember thinking, things aren't getting better, and this had gone on for several months, and I remember the Lord saying to me, he's like, Megan, you gotta give it all to me. And when you think about that, it's like, what does that mean? Like, am I supposed to sacrifice my firstborn? Am I supposed to, I don't know. Like, what does that, explain this, Lord? And he said, no, you need to give your marriage to me. And so what that looked like for me was, first of all, it was going to my husband and asking him for forgiveness for the way that I had treated him and the way that I had acted all those years when he was trying to love me. The second thing was, it was forgiving him. Yeah. He did not ask me to forgive him, but in faith, I knew that I needed to forgive him and my friend so that I could move forward because I didn't want to miss the blessings that the Lord had for me. And then the third, after the forgiveness, was literally laying my marriage at the altar. And what that looked like for me was completely letting go. Now, I went to Matt, my husband, and I told him, I said, I'm releasing you from this marriage. It was really hard to do that because I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that looked like, but I felt like that's what the Lord told me to do. And so I went to him and I said, you're free. I'm releasing you. I'm not holding on anymore. This is in the Lord's hands. And he didn't say anything. We didn't talk about it, but I followed what the Lord had told me to do. And what I didn't tell him was, even though I was releasing him from the marriage, the Lord had not told me that my marriage was over yet. And so I was still fighting. I still had hope because he didn't tell me that I was released from the marriage. He said, release your husband. Right. And so I was still believing for a miracle, and I was still praying and standing firm in the word that God had something bigger in all of this. Yeah. And that pain and that rejection that I was feeling was going to be completely turned around. I knew it was a season, and I didn't know what the future held. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I stood firm in his word. Mm-hmm. So,
gosh, I wish Matt was here to tell his story, because if you guys that's why we love hanging out with this family, because God redeems. There is nothing I think so many times we limit God. I think so many times we say, well, all we see around us is divorce, destruction, betrayal. I don't see God working. And that's why I wanted to bring flesh and blood here today to say that God redeems, that he transforms, that he can do things that the human person could never imagine themselves doing. So you're in the middle of this. Matt's confused. You're believing
for a miracle.
You're
literally
believing for a miracle.
Yeah, in the world's eyes, our marriage was over. And I told Danielle, my marriage is dead. I mean, it really was dead. I was grieving a death. Yeah. Like, I went through all of the stages. Now, I had sought help at this point. I did find a couple really good Christian counselors, and I was going to them a couple days a week. I had never been to a counselor in my life. So that was also a new experience for me. But those women stood with me. They counseled me. And what I loved about them is that they wouldn't let me talk about my husband. They wouldn't let me talk about my marriage. They wanted to work on me. And so it took a couple months of working on me and getting my life right and getting to the roots of those seeds, that were planted years ago, and why I had this resentment and why I had, shame and guilt and whatever that looked like. And once I broke free from that, wow. I mean, a weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And then that's when I really started to step into the forgiveness. And so I told you earlier that I had to, I didn't have to, but the Lord told me to go to Matt and ask for forgiveness. But I also had to forgive him. And so what that looked like for me was it was confessing it out of my mouth 1,000 times a day. I forgive my husband. I forgive him. And I would say it, and I didn't necessarily believe it, but I knew that if I confessed it with my mouth, that eventually one day I would believe it. And the devil would hear me, right? So he couldn't talk in my ear. Anytime I got that fear or anxiety, I forgive my husband. I forgive him whether he stays or whether he goes. It doesn't matter anymore because the Lord has my marriage and my life in his hands. And that is when changes started happening. When I laid it all at the altar, that's when it happened.
So talk to us about that. When things started changing, things started coming back together.
Yeah, so I learned that you have to proclaim things with your lips as a way of reinforcing in your heart, right? So you have to proclaim with your lips as a way of reinforcing in your heart. So that's what I was doing for several months. And I remember the day I felt this peace. I'm like, I woke up and physically and emotionally I was drained and I was tired, and I knew it was just a matter of days before something was about to happen. Either my husband was going to leave or I didn't know. I had no idea what the future held. And so he came to me and he looked at me and tears strolling down his face. And he repented and asked for forgiveness. And it was so beautiful. And see, God had been preparing my heart for months. So for months, I had walked in forgiveness. I had forgiven him. And it was just so beautiful. I could tell that he was broken. And so the Lord took two sinful, broken people, right? He took us, this dust that was on the ground from our shattered, broken ways, and he picked that dust up and breathed new life into our marriage. And only the Lord can do that. And so it was so beautiful. It was a beautiful moment. And we immediately sought help and, did all the right things. We set accountability in place and counseling and we just did it all. We were hungry to make this marriage work. And moving forward, well, I'll let you, what else is there that you want to ask?
So I know that you guys are probably dying to ask 2 questions, and so I'm going to ask them. I'm actually going to invite the worship team to come on back up on the stage as we close out. But I guess I have 2 questions. One is, how have you learned, because God has redeemed their marriage. It is a beautiful marriage. Even my mind cannot conceive, because I walk through so many just phone calls and conversations, and my mind cannot conceive the miracle of God when we're together. I see it. I see what God has done, and it truly is a better marriage today than it was prior to everything else that had happened before. And I have said this so many times before, but if you were to ask Megan and even to ask Matt, if you had to do it all over again, for the life that you are living right now, the marriage that you're in right now, for the home environment that her 2 girls are living in, because someone decided to humble themselves before the Lord and to be broken at his altar and say, I am going to fight for this marriage. I am not going to see 2 little girls walk through another broken relationship. I am not going to do this. I'm going to put my pride and I'm going to say, God, whatever happens, whether this marriage makes it, whether it doesn't, I am not going to hold on to unforgiveness. I'm going to release it, and you are in control. But I bet if you were to ask them, that was excruciating painful. We can't even get into the details of the times that she would tell me, I have cried so much, Danielle, I am exhausted. I can't even cry another tear. I am so heartbroken. But if you had to do it all over again for what today holds, would you do it?
I would. This testimony is such a miracle of God's love. It really is. And my marriage now is stronger and more powerful, and there is so much love. I love my husband. I see him as the way in the Lord's eyes. I see him as more than a conqueror, a child of the King. He's loved, he's forgiven.
But there are days.
There are days.
The enemy lies to you.
Absolutely.
And what do? Because let me tell you, once the enemy has gotten his foothold in that level, there is always going to be that lie. Many of you know in this room exactly what I'm talking about. Yours might not be a marriage betrayal. Yours might be something that you did that you wish you would have never done. It's a memory that can never be wiped out of your mind. And you've actually had an experience with God where you have been forgiven of that. You've been forgiven of that night. You've been forgiven of that addiction. But every once in a while, in the weak moments of our faith, the enemy holds it over our head and he starts lying. And I know, Megan, what do you do in that moment when you think, what's happening?
I go back to the Word, right? I read truth. I dig deep. I press in. And I go to my husband. And we talk about it. Because the enemy wants nothing more than to divide our marriage again. And it's not going to happen. It won't happen. There are so many people in the world that are afraid to share their struggles. We keep it hidden. We keep it a secret. We're afraid of what others will think. And it doesn't matter what it is. We've all felt rejection in some form or fashion. And I truly believe that God can take that rejection and he can deepen a compassion inside you to help others. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I want to give you hope no matter the situation, no matter what you're going through. There is hope. There is hope. I can say, me too. I've been there. I know. Yeah. It's so powerful. Yeah. So powerful.
I want us to just bow our heads. I want us to close our eyes. And Lord, with Megan's faith, I believe that something was stirred here in this place. God, you know my prayer tonight. Your word says that if we ask anything in your name, that you will do it. And tonight, I asked for healing over women's lives. And tonight, I asked for redemption. And tonight, I asked that the old would become new, that the ashes would be turned into beauty. Tonight, I prayed that shame would be trampled on. That, Lord, I prayed that tonight, Lord, those secret things, God, we would lay them at your cross. God, I prayed that tonight burdens would be lifted off of women's shoulders. Tonight, I prayed for forgiveness to happen. Tonight, I pray for memories to be healed. Tonight, I have prayed for those drives to the abortion clinics to be removed. And God, that you will receive all the glory. God, tonight, I speak over abuse in the name of Jesus. I pray, oh God, that tonight would be a night of healing, that in just the next few moments, that what the enemy has lodged into these women, Lord, that they will walk away in freedom, oh God. Lord, knowing that this journey, this path will not be easy, but it is worth it. It is worth it. God, that one day, Lord, they will sit across a table with a girlfriend and that they will say that the enemy had kept in shame and in secret. I can share with you that God is going to get the glory for this. God, I pray for you to tonight what only you can do. What only you can do. What only your presence can do. Lord, that no one can do it, but only you. And God, you are more than able, and you are more than willing. Lord, is this song that we are going to sing tonight one last time, that we are going to receive your love, and we are not going to resist it. God, we're going to receive it. And Lord, tonight just might be the first step. But Lord, I believe you're going to make a courageous women here tonight that are going to have the courage to take the next step and the next step, and that they will look back and see an incredible journey. We thank you for this.